Good evening. My name is Katie Frederick, and I want to welcome everyone to this evening's self-advocacy webinar, part of the series brought to you by Family Connect, which is part of our APH Connect Center. We have a great evening lined up for everyone, and as people are filing in, I want to go ahead and I'm going to pause the recording so that we can go over the opening ACV REP credit. So I will pause the recording. And want to welcome you to the self-advocacy webinar. And I will hand things off to Dr. Lauren Lieberman for this evening's program.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you, Olaya, and to Melissa for helping set this up. And we're real excited about this summer series that we're putting on to help get our kids ready for summer and being advocates for themselves and knowing what to do related to sports and physical activity. And I have here with me my dear friend, Ruth Childs. And Ruth, why don't you introduce yourself, Ruth?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name's Ruth Childs, and I work at Brockport with Lauren. I'm in a different department. I'm in the theater department, and Lauren and I have been friends for about 20 years, and we started collaborating together on self-advocacy programming, specifically at her Capabilities program, probably 5 to 7 years ago. And we love working together, and we found so many ways to create a really exciting self-advocacy curriculum at camp. And now we're just finishing up collaborating on our first book together, and the image of it is right there. So yeah, we're just thrilled to be here tonight and really enjoy working together and helping bring self-advocacy to a wider audience. So thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. And yeah, the book that Ruth's talking about is called Infusing Self-Advocacy into Physical Education and Health Education. And it's through Shape America, and it's from Jones and Bartlett Publishers, and it'll be out this September. So that's a whole curriculum guide, but we're going to also talk to you about one more focused on kids with visual impairments that's a little more accessible to us. And I'm Lauren Lieberman. I'm a distinguished service professor at SUNY Brockport. I'm in the kinesiology department, and I teach adapted physical education. But I also am the founder and director of Campabilities. It's a sports camp for kids who are visually impaired, blind or deafblind, and I run the Institute on Movement Studies for individuals with visual impairment. So this is part of our institute. Ruth's part of our institute. Now that you're here in this workshop, you are part of our institute. So welcome. Thanks everyone for being here. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat to make sure if we miss something, let us know. Or if we say an acronym, then we owe you $1. If you don't explain the acronym, then we owe you $1. Okay. So take it away, Ruth.
Great. So we'll just start out with a general definition of self-advocacy. So the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines self-advocacy as the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal, the act or process of advocating for something. And this definition gives a really nice general foundation of the spirit of self-advocacy. But for me, what's most important in this definition is that self-advocacy is active. It's a verb, it's a process. It's not a static thing. It's something that everyone can do, everyone can learn, everyone can practice. So if you just can sort of keep that in mind as we go through the webinar tonight, I think you'll see where Lauren and I are coming from as we work together this evening. So our view is that self-advocacy is a concept with many, many implications for the classroom, but also beyond. Self-advocacy teaches students how to speak up, how to make life decisions, how to gather information, and also how to find people who can help them reach their goals and dreams. And another thing just to think about is that self-advocacy is often discussed in conjunction with self-determination, and it's usually considered to be a key component of self-determination. And just a sort of refresher for me and for anyone else, self-determination really looks at how an individual controls their own life, and more specifically, how they make, excuse me, choices and speak up for the choices that they want and believe in. So I hope as you think about self-advocacy that you keep that idea of self-determination in mind as well.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we feel pretty strongly about is listening to the student's voice. And some of you might have seen this in our webinar last week, but we felt like it was very important to show. And this video is on the Campabilities website under instructional materials, and it's called I Feel Included When. We wanted to hear from the kids, and this is so important to hear their voice about that, what they want and need related to whatever activity or program you're doing. In this case, it's related to physical education. So let's hear what they have to say.
The purpose of this video is to help
teachers,
administrators, professors, paraeducators understand what children with visual impairments want and need to feel included in physical education. And it comes all the way out.
jump higher.
What makes me feel included in my gym class is
when my peers and friends include me in whatever activity they're doing and I'm not just left on the sidelines.
When I'm working out in the weight room, my coach explains and helps me.
I get first pick on a team.
When I get to participate in many sports, I am able to compete and have fun with my friends.
When people cheer me on during some of the games that we play.
When I excel and help my team at sports that have been modified so I can participate within the group.
When they have the right equipment for me and my friends agree to help me.
When the teacher modifies their activities so that way I am able to do it instead of just having me do something else.
When the people ask me if I want to play.
When they ask me first if I want the modification, sometimes, I'd rather, decide for myself if I need it.
I don't say that I can't do something just because I'm blind, because, well, I can.
Try to figure out what they want to do, what they feel comfortable with, and try to, do things to make that possible and let them be with the other group.
A loss of sight is not a loss of vision. If you believe you can achieve, you are strong.
We are all
Normal kids.
We want to be treated that way. We just need some help sometimes. We just want to play with the rest of them.
You can climb, you can hike, you can tumble, you can swim.
All right. So, who can tell me what did the athletes want? What did they want to feel included? What would help them make them feel included? You can put it in the chat if you would. Let's see. Donna, thank you, Donna. They want to be given choices, exactly. To have a say in their accommodations, exactly. They want to be listened to. They want modifications. They want to be an active participant, not passive. Asked first. To compete with the class, not on the sidelines, exactly. Not to be picked last. They shouldn't be picking teams anyway, by the way. They want to be able to play with everyone and not to do something different. Thank you, Kathleen. Exactly. Anybody else to get any other messages from the kids there? They want to play with the rest of them. I love that saying at the end, because that's what they kept saying to me. We just want to play with everybody else. And in order to do that, if you were at our session last week, the teacher has to universally design their class. And if you want to know more about that, you can maybe look at the webinar from last week. So yes, that's about I Feel Included When. And I think it's just so important to give the children a voice And that's a big part of self-advocacy, to know everything that they need, not just little parts of what they need.
Mm-hmm. So the next thing we wanted to do was just give a case study in self-advocacy. And the student we wanted to highlight, her name is Anna, and she's a middle school student, and she was in her general education class with her peers for most of the day. However, she was placed in a self-contained physical education class due to her mild intellectual disability. And she did not want to be in that class. She wanted to be back in her general physical education class with her friends. So the multidisciplinary team wasn't sure that the general physical education class was the right setting for her. And she met with her IEP team and explained this to them, but they were a little resistant. So what Anna did was she asked for another meeting, and she explained her needs and abilities. And she also told them that she went to a sports camp in the summer, probably Camp Abilities, or a regular camp in her neighborhood. And she was successful in participating with her same age peers. 1 week later, Anna had a revised individualized education program, and she was in her physical education with her peers from her classroom, thanks to her persistent self-advocacy. So we just wanted to highlight Anna because it shows that sometimes students don't get what they want when they advocate for themselves, and they have to recalibrate and reassess and think about what went well, maybe make some adjustments, and then continue advocating until they get what they need. So yeah, so that's Anna's story.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah. So the next thing we wanted just to ask you, and again, if you wouldn't mind just putting it in the chat, is what is your experience with advocacy? So any general experience in the classroom, in the community? If you wouldn't mind just putting any experiences you've had. So there's a great deal of room for improvement. Yes, for sure. Any other thoughts? Students are afraid to speak up. Melissa says, I try to teach it to all students from little on. Yes, that's amazing. Helping deafblind people realize they can make choices and advocate. Yeah, I think that's something that Lauren and I have seen a lot, is that sometimes the students don't realize they can advocate for themselves, and they don't realize the choices they have available to them. A big part of that is helping them figure out what they want. Yes. Kathleen says, modeling how to advocate, giving examples of what can be done in a situation to get a desired outcome. Yes. And I think finding different ways to teach it is really important. Jennifer says, I recently had a teacher tell me that the high school student was doing fine with no VI services. The student was legally blind, and when given the opportunity to be heard, there are so many areas that really were not fine. Yeah. That's unfortunately a really good example.
Yeah, and I think sometimes participation, they see participation as the goal when we see achievement as the goal, and they look to all the other kids. Their goals for all the kids are achievement, but for our kids, participation is the end goal, but that doesn't have to be the goal, and it shouldn't be the goal.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's happening there, Jennifer. They're participating, and they think, oh, they're good. You know, they're with their friends. They're doing whatever anyone else is doing, but they're not.
Yeah.
Points.
Yeah.
Really good points.
Yeah. So, and I think, again, that reinforces the idea that we need to infuse self-advocacy into the curriculum very early on, and then continue throughout their educational career and beyond.
Thank you, Ruth. And earlier, Laura said that, especially like looking at kids who are deafblind or kids that have multiple disabilities, finding out what do they want to participate. And she said that a lot of the teachers just are excusing them from participation. And there's so much, I mean, that's a whole nother presentation that we can do related to kids with visual impairments and additional disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to share a great resource on the Capabilities website. We just created videos and tip sheets for exactly that, kids with visual impairments and additional disabilities, to teach teachers how to teach these children, particularly kids with visual impairment and additional disabilities, kids who are deafblind. So there's tip sheets on CVI, on deafblindness, kids with Marfan syndrome, kids with Down syndrome, and also kids with cerebral palsy. I mean, there's a bunch of tip sheets there, autism, that for kids with visual impairments and additional disabilities, because most of our teachers were never even taught how to teach kids with visual impairments, let alone additional disabilities. But like, I'd be happy to expand on that at some point. We don't have time today to do that, but I do think that it's important to find out what their function is and what will help them access the activity that's being taught so that they can reach their potential. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Laura, but we can always talk offline if I can help any, or, if we can help anybody specifically. Okay, great points. Let's see if anybody else added. Two more. Let's see. And then Jennifer also said, I had a college graduate that finished her BA and did not know how to format a written document because the college professors knew that she was blind, so had no expectations for formatting a document. Right. That's, again, example of the low expectations. Like, oh, so she can participate, but they're not holding her to the same standards as their peers. So good points. So I just want to talk about a little bit about relationships. And there's some of these topics, it says here, self-advocacy, self-determination, and independence. And we teach these often in isolation. And so, for example, self-determination is a big part of the ECC. There's a lot of programming surrounding self-determination, but there's a few things I think that we have to go further in order to make sure it gets to the self-advocacy stage and the independence stage. And let me just give you an example that self-determination is the ability, and Ruth talked about it earlier, to have choices and control over your life. But oftentimes if a child says, and I'll take guide running, for example, because we promote different ways to run for the kids. We teach 5 or 6 different ways to run: human guide, treadmills, on a tether. And oftentimes a child will come and just say, oh, I want to run on a tether. Oh, he made a choice. No, that's the only thing he knows how to do. And so the problem is oftentimes we think the child's making a choice, but they really don't know everything else that's out there. And so if I ask a child what flotation device they want to use, I have to show them every kind of flotation device that's available. I'm not just going to say a life jacket. I'm going to show them the different kind of life jackets and the different kinds of pool noodles. There's lots of different kinds of pool noodles and kickboards. I mean, we have little baby kickboards and then we have big heavy ones. And if you're scared, you want to use the big one. And so you can really only be self-determined if you really know all the choices that are out there. And then the kids are going to know what to ask for, because they won't know how to self-advocate if they don't know what's out there. And so this is a big part of self-determination, is self-advocacy. And that lends itself really well to independence, because if we really want them to be able to transition and go out into the community and to generalize these skills, we have to teach them all the variables and all the choices that are out there and what's available to them. And so, for example, we're going to go for a bike ride. Well, what kind of bikes do you have? Do you have a tricycle? Do you have a tandem bike? Oh, I can ride a single. Oh, just because I'm visually impaired? No, I can ride a single. And if they continue to say, oh, no, we don't think you should do that, I ride a single at home. And I've even had my own coaches at camp sometimes will be a little nervous to let one of the athletes ride a single. And I'm like, we need to listen to him. He rides a single at home. Let him ride the single. And so encouraging them to kind of fight back if someone doubts their abilities or limits what they can do. And those are the kind of things that we need to teach again and again. And Ruth's going to talk about practicing this, because you might say it once and they'll be like, oh, no, the other kids are using that. Why don't you just use this one? No, if the other kids are using it, then it'll be my turn very soon. And we have to teach them that. And so I think it's really important that when we do focus on the expanded core curriculum, and I know everybody does, we have to teach self-advocacy every part of the expanded core curriculum. Every component needs self-advocacy to be embedded in it. And so if we think about transition, and this is an interesting point that it took me a while to figure out. We teach a lot about universal design. So when we teach, for example, a volleyball game, we'll teach the kids to use a variety of different balls, we'll teach different rules, we'll teach them different places to serve the ball. But what we have to remember is that if we don't teach them the traditional rules of volleyball, they don't know how what they're learning varies from the traditional rules. And so when they get into the community and they're playing volleyball, let's say it's a birthday party or a picnic, or they're playing on a community program, they know what to ask because they're probably going to set it up with the traditional rules, but they have to say, hey, is there a beach ball here? Or is there, where's a different place where I can serve it? Please show me where the net is because I want to I'm really good. I can take 6 steps backwards and serve from there. And so that's really important for them to not only know what they need, but practice asking for it. And we're gonna share some different scripts to help do that. But you see these relationships. And the other thing we're going to talk about in a minute too is that it can't be done just in physical education or just with the vision teacher or mobility teacher. It has to be done with the entire team. Everybody has to support and promote that. Okay.
Any questions about that before we go on?
Oh, Sharon said she taught a 30-year-old to shake hands with her right hand. That's good. You know, it's never too old to learn how to do certain things. Especially nowadays, I think we might have all forgotten how to do that.
I think so.
Great point.
Yeah. All right. So we just wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing with us how you currently teach self-advocacy, whether it's learning how to shake hands or anything else. But what are your current tools for teaching teaching self-advocacy? Sorry. Role play, that's awesome. That's great. I think that's a really good way to practice. And we do a lot of that at Camp Abilities. We have the counselors play the teachers and coaches and their IEP teams, and it really works well. Knowing the accommodations, knowing their rights is very important. And a lot of self-advocacy is speaking up with family members. Yeah. And sometimes that is a very challenging audience for sure. Thank you, Ashley. Any other examples? Donna says helping them practice how to figure out their needs and make those needs known. Yes. Writing down interests, needs, and preferences. That's wonderful. I think the practice is really important because that, certainly from a theater background, we rehearse a lot, and the more people rehearse and practice, they get ready they're prepared for the unexpected thing that will happen, or the cell phone that'll ring in the middle of the conversation, or a random question from the person they're talking to. So those rehearsals really help them get comfortable. It gives them a really nice safety net. Any other ways that you currently teach self-advocacy? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so is this me, Lauren, or is this you?
This is you.
This is me. Great. So when Lauren and it is a mindset. I agree, Sharon. It is a mindset. Yeah. So when we were researching for our book, Lauren and I came across this idea of these 4 real sort of components, these 4 pillars of self-advocacy. And we found them in an article by David Test. And we just latched onto this idea and thought it was fantastic. And basically each of the components builds on top of each other. So knowledge of self is obviously just really knowing yourself, knowing what you like, what the modifications you want, knowing what you want to play, knowing the kids you want to be around. Next is the knowledge of rights. So what is your right in terms of participation in school? What are your rights in terms of participation in the community? What are you allowed to do? The third component is communication. So how do you express those needs? And that's something that Lauren and I have spent a lot of time developing and working on, and giving students a framework for communicating. And then the practice, the rehearsal, standing or sitting, straight across from someone, speaking slowly, emphasizing certain words, asking questions. All of these things are very, you can work on them, but they're a really important part of communication. And then the final component of self-advocacy is leadership. So the idea is that when a person masters the three previous components, that then they can really work on the leadership component, which is advocating for other people. So, I see my friend and they're not getting what they need, and I think they should. So really trying to change the system. And we just think that this way of looking at self-advocacy makes sense, but it's also really exciting. Thanks, Lauren.
And we're going to embed this into a few things that we talk about
Yes.
as well. So I'm going to give you some examples of each of these things. And I think these are some resources that you can take down. We're going to show you one of these, but I'm just going to give you an example of each one and where you can find that. So, for example, knowledge of self. Who am I? What do I need? Now, one thing that goes way back, I don't know if any of you read this. It's called Going Places, and it's a book through APH, and that's a transition curriculum for kids like 14 to 21 who are visually impaired or have additional disabilities. And basically it looks at you. So do you like outdoor or indoor activities? Do you like activities going to make you sweat, or would you rather not sweat? Would you rather be a person that does individual activities, or you want to do it in a team or a group? And so there's this whole checklist. Who am I? What do I like? Do I want to be competitive? Do I just want to do it for enjoyment? Do I want to set goals? And so you learn so much about yourself. So that's called Going Places. It's a free download now from APH, but we also put it on our Capabilities website under instructional materials. And it takes a child through this whole list, helps them narrow down what they want to find out, who are they, and what activities do they want to do when they grow up, and how do they get there. It's a great book. And then also through Capabilities, this was through a Lavelle grant, we created this modification checklist. So now you find out you like to do some of these certain sports and activities, but what are the modifications you need? So there's this whole modification checklist where the kids can check off everything that they need in order to be successful in that activity. And we do teach them that they can ask to be taught with physical guidance or with tactile modeling. Do you want to be taught coactively, or would you rather just nobody touch you or you touch nobody else and just do verbal instruction, which I think is a little harder if you're blind, but that's a choice. And on that modification checklist, it gives you a lot of variables and different instructional choices. So that's one. Oh, and that's also on our Capabilities website under instructional materials, so that you can download both of those things to help with the knowledge of self piece. And the next thing is the knowledge of rights. So we need to empower our students with information about their rights related to physical education and sport and other areas. Well, they have the right, number one, and I saw some people put in the chat that some kids are just removed from physical education. They need to know, and the teachers need to know, that physical education is a direct service. It's required by law, and it's not even allowed to be, they're not even allowed to be excused from physical education. If their placement isn't where they want to be, like Anna's story, they can advocate to be in a different placement according to the law. But every child needs to understand that they have the right to be in physical education and in after-school sports. Our last Lavelle grant was all about after-school sports, and so a coach is required to allow every student to try out for every sport. If they don't know what to do related to modifications or accommodations for each sport, we actually have videos of most sports on our website under instructional materials, and they can watch those videos. And so knowledge of rights, empowering the students, there's a lot that they need to know in order for them to be confident and advocate for themselves. Also is communication. They need to learn how to practice advocating for their needs. And that's why Ruth and I just finished with our team from the Foreseeable Future Foundation. We just finished the self-advocacy playbook that Ruth is actually going to show you in a little bit. But that is a great way to practice communication. And, Ruth, with her theater background, teaches the kids to focus, square up with the person, look them in the eye, articulate, don't get too quiet or too loud, and to just say what you think and what you need and let them know exactly what's happening. So that's something that we need to really teach the kids, because so many of the kids, like somebody of authority will say, well, you can't do that, you're a liability. And they'll talk about the dignity of risk. And if you were here last week, you know more about the dignity of risk. They can talk about that. They have that right to get hurt just like their peers. Communication is key. And we can share some of those other resources from last week. I sent Olaya and Melissa tons of articles if you're interested in those. And then the last one is leadership. And so many of our kids have gotten to the point where they feel confident enough in themselves to be able to advocate for the needs of others and be a role model. And so once they feel comfortable and have gotten some of their needs met and understand how to do it, not only are they helping other, maybe younger kids, but they also are able to advocate for other people themselves. And if you want to meet some of these amazing young people, one of our webinars in this series is actually a panel of young adults who have advocated for themselves and gotten on different sports teams or community teams, and we're going to showcase them and let them tell their stories to you.
I think that's in July.
It's in July. Okay, so so that'll be in July, and it'll be great if you want to tell some of your students about it, have them sign up and come and listen to some other of their peers who have gone there, have gone out of their way, and maybe gone out of their comfort zone. We all have to do it. People that we're not comfortable talking to about something that's more difficult than we thought it would be, but they've done it, and you know what? You get where you want to be when you do that. Okay. So those are just some examples of each. Does anybody have any questions or anything you want to add to this?
Donna put a question in the chat, Lauren. Does leadership training include making sure that they know that the others need to decide what they want?
Yes, so leadership is actually probing the kids and asking them, well, what have you done? What did you ask for? What did you get? What do you still want? Who did you talk to? Sometimes you talk to the wrong person. And so, it's kind of a process that we're going through now. So maybe we could maybe look at a checklist that the leaders can kind of ask in order to help people get what they want.
Well, I think actually this slide shows what the student leaders could use to help guide the younger students or students who want to advocate for something. And these are 5 steps to self-advocacy that we put together just based on the workshops we were doing and the trainings we were doing at Camp Abilities. And to me, most of these steps work in most situations. So basically, the way you would guide a student or a student would guide themselves through the process is, first of all, what's the issue? What is it that they want to advocate for? Inclusion in a PE class with their friends in their regular classroom, or they want to participate in gymnastics after school. So they really pinpoint and get very specific about the issue. Write it down. Here's the issue. The second thing is, what do I need to resolve the issue? So I might a student might need a particular kind of ball to be able to use in the sport, or they might need a running guide. They might need some extra time to check out the classroom or the gym before the other children arrive. But again, be very, very specific about what they need to resolve the issue. The third thing is who can help me resolve the issue. So just like Lauren said, maybe the student is actually speaking to the wrong person, or they also need to speak to the athletic director, or they need to speak to a principal or a counselor. Number 4, again, we are sort of harping on this, but it's so important. Really effectively communicate my needs. So practicing it, rehearsing it, role playing with someone that they trust. And then after they have communicated their needs, the students need to reflect on the outcome. How did it go? What went well? What do I need to work on? Did I get everything I asked for? Did I get some of what I asked for? Do I need to revisit this and try again? So these steps, I think, are crucial and give us a foundation for teaching students and helping students learn how to advocate for themselves. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. So those are the 5 steps in self-advocacy. And I want to share Chris's story with you. And this is one story of many that this has happened to, but it's just a great illustration of how if a child can guide their own self-advocacy with the team, it can be really helpful. So Chris is one of our athletes, came to camp since Camp Can Do since he was 7. And when he was in middle school, he was at risk for a retinal detachment. So his parents, the physical education teachers, were concerned about him getting involved in like a traditional physical education class that was rough and tumble with power volleyball and hockey and things like that. And so as he went through school, they tried to do some modifications and adaptations. And sometimes Chris would hide because he didn't want to be pulled out or didn't want any kind of special treatment. And so finally, I went in and talked to the parents. We had a meeting with the parents, a physical education teacher, and the vision teacher. And we decided, because Chris, he's an amazing athlete, but we didn't want him to lose any more vision. And so what we did was we set up an advocacy program where he taught his peers what he could see and what he needed. And so the vision teacher came in with occluders, and he self-selected his peers that he wanted to be in his class. And they all volunteered because they're all good friends. And so they did a training with his friends that really had no idea what he could see. I mean, he wore these sport goggles. He just looked like a cool kid. They knew that he had to sit closer to the board, that he had a teacher that came in and helped him, but they didn't know really what he saw. And so when they created a modified class for him with his peers that understood what he needed, the physical education teachers and the vision teachers worked with him. They showed the peers what he could see, and then they practiced the upcoming units that they were going to do with the modifications that he would need. And they were like, dude, whatever you need, man. And they were just hugging him and giving him high fives. And his mother was crying and saying, I never thought it would be that easy. Like, if it were that easy, why didn't we do it before? But we just weren't ready, and they weren't ready. So I do think that having that team approach and educating the peers about the needs of the kids will really help the kids accommodate the needs of our kids with visual impairments. And it isn't always that easy, and sometimes classes are too big. Sometimes the physical education teachers don't feel as much support as they had at this particular school, but it can work. And I've seen it work, and I do think that we just need to work through it and talk to people and educate every single person that's part of the team. So that's one. So the other thing that's really important is to integrate self-advocacy skills. And how do we integrate them? And our focus has been on health and physical education, but there's so many places. You can integrate self-advocacy on the playground, in after-school sports. I mean, you can integrate self-advocacy skills in theater, in the band. And so it may require questioning some traditional ways of teaching and relating to students. So not every single teacher is going to be accommodating to self-advocacy. And some teachers are also a little more, they're set in their ways and they don't want people to question their traditional ways. Mm-hmm. And we also view self-advocacy as kind of steps. It's a series of skills that students need to practice and hone in over time. And we actually say it's its own sport. And that's why we called our book the Self-Advocacy Playbook. And we think it's important to intentionally integrate self-advocacy with physical and cognitive skill development. So, even like you talk about in cooking, I mean, there's different ways that kids can mix ingredients, can measure ingredients, and there's different types of knives and different types of bowls. Some kids might gravitate or be more successful with some than others, but they need to know what's there. And I can't see what this bottom one is. Let me see something. And then we also need to, like we said, encourage the transfer of learning and generalization. So if they're learning these skills in one area, they have to be able to feel comfortable doing them in another area. I mean, I have students sometimes at the university, they'll sometimes ask me about the requirements in another class. And I say, well, I can't speak for another professor. Well, but you're easier to talk to. But you have to be able to learn how to talk to everyone, because when they get out there, I mean, they get into their college or their vocational skills trainings, they have to be able to interact with everyone. Mm-hmm. We need to create a culture that promotes self-advocacy, and we can't be teachers that are afraid of students asking us or telling us what they want. Sometimes telling them not to say it in front of everyone is a good point. Like, sense the situation. If the teacher is telling you to do something and you have an accommodation you need, maybe take them aside and not say it in front of everyone because you don't want to embarrass them. Okay? And then we also need to explicitly teach self-advocacy and provide opportunities for practice. There were a few years at the beginning where we would try to fit Ruth in, and we kind of rushed it, and it just wasn't enough time. And now we actually put it on the schedule. It's self-advocacy training, mm-hmm. practice time, and also the kids get time. Ruth has a schedule where the kids can actually sit and practice with her. Mm-hmm. It has to be part of the training process. And then the other thing that we believe in, that there has to be criteria for feedback and reflection. You can't just self-advocate and then not think about it. What just happened? What did you get? Did you get what you wanted? Did you get something of what you wanted, or did you take a step backwards? So these are some kind of things that we have to ask the kids. Is that in the step in the right direction? And then again, like we said, promoting the transfer of learning. So if you can do that here at camp, or you can do that there in that protected environment of maybe physical education, can you do that when you're in your geometry class and the teacher's not explaining what they're doing? And so many times kids will say, yeah, they put it on the board and they never say what they're doing. Well, you tell me all the time you can't see me or you don't know what I'm saying. Why can't you tell them? So that's important to get them to understand that you feel comfortable here, you have to be able to do it in other places as well. Okay, and this schematic is pretty much talking about what we were talking about. It has to be a team approach. If you're implementing this in school, it can't be done in isolation, and everybody has to get on board and get on the same page. And so in the middle here is self-advocacy. And the circles around it are the whole team. It's the physical education teacher. You see how he put us on the top? Physical education teacher. Then we have the speech therapist. If they have a speech therapist, the principal has to believe in this. The special education teacher and the whole team, the parents, the therapist, if they get PT or OT. The student has to be part of the team that's talking about when, where, how to infuse self-advocacy. And then if they have a general education teacher, that gen ed teacher. And I would go as far as saying their sighted peers, because the sighted peers need to know that they have a voice and that their peers have a voice. And they can also speak up and say, hey, Rashad, do you need to sit a little closer to the board? I notice you usually do, and there's no room here. Do you need to sit a little closer? They can help as well. And so I'm sure that everybody here, I mean, of course, the vision teachers are on here, O&M teachers on here. everybody needs to work together, and we need to also increase awareness. If kids are self-advocating in some classes and not others, it doesn't really paint an equal picture.
Mhm.
Okay, let's see, there's something in the chat here. And then Donna said part of the self-reflection could be to brainstorm on how it could have been done better next time.
Yeah.
Actually, in our book, we do a lot of that. Like, let's just
Mhm.
say, hey, we talk about with the group about what we could have we done better. I really like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, I think I can't remember if this is me or
This is you. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Talking about
It's
Braden.
okay. So
Yeah.
this is Braden. Some of you guys might have seen Braden. He's been in both of our Capabilities was on HBO Real Sports, and Braden was on both of these, and you could see him in the last HBO special. It was 2015, and he was little. He was a little kid,
Mhm.
and he was afraid. He wasn't as confident as he is now. And then when he was in middle school, he tried out for his cross country team, and they just did not know what to do. They were so nervous about getting him on his cross country team, and they just started out being really overprotective. They didn't know how to find a guide or where to find a guide, and he slowly cut down his 5K time, slowly cut down his time. And the most difficult task we've had in the last few years is not just finding a guide, but finding a guide as fast as Braden. And everybody in his school now is totally on board. They believe in finding him a guide, but he's so fast. He just finished the Rochester Half Marathon just a few weeks ago in under, oh, I want to say
Under 2.
it was a 150 something. And
Mhm.
he's just really killing it. And it's because he advocated for himself, said that I want to be on the cross country team. I need a guide. This is how I run. And he's always went to them before the season and told them what he needed, and they've bent over backwards because they know he's not going to give up on what he wants to do, and he has the same rights as everyone else. And he is in kind of a small town and not a very big high school. It's not easy to find guides, but they make it happen because they know that that's what Braden wants and needs. And so I just love that picture his mom sent to me, and it just makes me happy to know that self-advocacy and capabilities got him to where he is now. So who knows? You never know where you're going to see him next. Maybe a Paralympics.
Yeah. So what we're just showing in this slide is that, again, we can infuse self-advocacy into the curriculum and we can assess it. Okay, so we can teach it like any other skill. If you can establish clear, measurable outcomes, you can teach content through the skill. One must provide practice time. We can formatively assess by providing effective feedback. We can gather, analyze, interpret evidence, and we can use the results to improve teaching and learning by adjusting the instruction if needed. And I would say, as a teacher myself, I don't think I've worked as hard on my teaching as I have in the last 2.5 years during the pandemic, but putting self-advocacy into the curriculum, it just takes practice, and we found that the students are so open to it and want to learn it and enjoy practicing it. So we just encourage you to do it, and we just want to share that it's doable. And in our book and also in the playbook, there are tons of ideas for lessons and ways to include self-advocacy. So thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Ruth.
And then here we just want to show you some ways that you can put self-advocacy right into physical education. So this is just an example of one particular genre of self-advocacy, if you will. So in a physical education class, we can provide a variety of equipment to students so they can choose what works best for them. So if you're providing different balls, we could have beeping balls, beach balls, yarn balls, balls with different textures, balls that make sounds, and let the students pick what they like best. Another way to do it is teach students to adapt the rules of the game to suit their needs, as well as the needs of the class, to gain self-knowledge and practice leadership skills. A third way is to allow students to teach a game or activity of their choice to the class, and this helps them develop leadership and communication skills. A fourth way is to encourage involvement in clubs and organizations within as well as outside of the school environment. So join that community running group. And then lastly, facilitate role play situations or use small or large group discussions that require self-advocacy skills. So again, that sort of goes back to analyzing what went well, what didn't go well, having that moment of self-reflection. I think that's a really important aspect to self-advocacy. So that's just one way you can put self-advocacy right into physical education as an example.
Okay. One sec.
Got this, Lauren.
I don't know why it's not letting. Here we go.
There it is. Okay, so we just wanted to show you here what the blank script might look like in the playbook, and I'll even just sort of show you here. And this is the playbook that we've worked on, but you know, we've got it right here in the book that students can fill in the blanks so that they create their own script and can practice it. So step one in working on a script that they're going to use to advocate for themselves. First of all, they need to introduce themselves. And then don't forget to say thank you and explain clearly the reason that you want to meet with this person. The second step, make it personal. You've got real reasons for wanting this accommodation and share those reasons. So if it's someone like Braden, for example, that Lauren just spoke about, when he ran at camp, his mile time or his 400-meter time went down drastically during the week, right, Lauren? Like the more he practiced, the faster he got. So he got a real sense of, when I ran at camp, I loved it and it made me feel really happy, and I want to join the cross-country team. And so making it personal so that the speech is very specific and unique to that particular child or student is a really good persuasive strategy. It's a way that the student can change the mind of the person that they're speaking to. And that's the reason that they're having this conversation. The third step is explaining what you need and anticipate the questions. So we say, this is your chance to educate, help the coach help you. And this is also a good time to get help from your support team if they're with the student in the meeting. But you might need a very specific piece of equipment or a guide, or you might need time before the rest of the class comes in to get comfortable with the game or the activity or whatever it is. But again, being very specific, we even encourage students to give links to where equipment could be bought. How much will it cost? How will they cover the cost? You know, examples. So again, the more specific the student is, the better. And then the fourth step is concluding thoughts, wrapping it up. Remember to say thank you. And again, just state one more time what you need. And then the fifth step is reflecting on the outcome. How did it go? What could have gone better? What went great? What's next? But this is exactly what we do with the students at Camp Abilities. And they don't need to make these long, you know, in-depth scripts, short, simple, very rehearsable. And then they have that nice foundation going into the actual conversation with whoever they're meeting with. And just a key thing to think about going forward is just using that word persuasion. So how are they going to persuade the person to change their mind? And that's really at the core of this script. Thanks.
Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah. So Donna says it's so organized. Thanks, Donna. I think it really helps. So I think, let's see what time it is. Oh, we've got 5 minutes left. So one of the things that helped Lauren and I is thinking of a 10-10-10 action plan. So what's something you can do to work on self-advocacy with your students in the next 10 days, in the next 10 weeks, in the next 10 months? So if anyone can think of anything specific that they might like to try, you can put that in the chat. But this is also a good time if you have any specific questions for me or Lauren, or any ideas that you'd like to share. Don't be shy. And Lauren's just sharing here.
Sorry, I'm trying
she
to.
did share. Just some places where you can find some of the materials that we've referenced today. So the first resource is our book that we're so excited about. I think it'll be coming out in the fall. And then, as Lauren mentioned earlier, there are tons of videos and lots of instructional materials, tip sheets at the Capabilities website. And then also our playbook that we've been working on lately. You can download the whole book. We call it I Hope I Can, I Will. And that's available on the Capabilities site as well. And in a few other places, right, Lauren?
Yes, so it's also available on the APH Connect Center website, and also the Foreseeable Future Foundation is who sponsored the playbook, and it's also on the Foreseeable Future Foundation website. So there's a lot of ways to get to that self-advocacy playbook. And this summer we're actually making a self-advocacy video, and it's from the kids and talking about what they did related to self-advocacy and how they got to where they are and what helped them. So it's going to be powerful and short and sweet, but so looking forward to having that out and sharing that with everyone as well. Let's see what else. These are great plans and ideas for all students. Thank you so much. I'm inspired. Thank you, Tony. And thank you, Donna. Awesome. Does anybody else have any other resources you want to share? Because I know
that's
that
a good
there's
idea.
probably some other self-advocacy. I mean, the Going Places book is a resource that we made years and years ago that's focusing on transition age kids, and related to sports and recreation. But is there any other resources that people know of that you want to share? Well, I know it's getting kind of late, but
yeah,
just wanted to say, so Jennifer said, thank you for some excellent resources. Thank you, Jennifer. Audrey said, this was fantastic. Thank you for your important work. Me self-advocacy curriculum from University of Oklahoma.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Oh, okay. And Donna said they've written a process for teaching people who are deaf-blind. That's great. You can share that. If you can share that, Donna, that would be great. Oh, thanks, Lindsay. Lindsay says we flow well together to present.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Lindsay. We practiced a lot.
Yeah, we did.
We wanted to be confident.
Yep. And persuasive.
We encourage everybody to look at there's 5 more of these workshops. One's on expanded core curriculum, one's on outdoor adventure. Expanded core outdoor adventure. There's one on the panel, and then the panel of kids that we talked about. And then there's 2 more that are going to be on motor development and motor behavior. So those are going to be really good too coming up.